Hello, I'm Patricia Walls, and welcome to the Enlightened Path podcast. And I'm excited today to have my sister, RachelSofia, with us. And a lot of you already know about Rachel because I talk about her all the time. And she is co-author of the Galactic Frequencies of Light, and she's actually the artist for the cover of the Galactic Frequencies of Light. You can see some of her paintings. She's starting a new one over there behind her. So anyway, I'm excited that we could coordinate our times because she's in Wales. And what time is it there right now?
It is 4:15. So we're
Okay,
6 hours apart.
Yeah, so here it's 10 a.m. So sometimes she and I have a hard time coordinating our time differences, but I'm excited that we could work it out and that you could join us today. And I'm excited about what you're going to share. Oh, so about Rachel, besides being the co-author of Galactic Frequencies of Light, she's the one who actually, I want to say, activated me for light language, because I had already had experience with light language, but I wasn't vocalizing it until I met with Rachel in Glastonbury in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and Rachel is involved in the community of Diamond Light, and has a lot of knowledge to share about the Diamond Light teachings and also the original Reiki teachings. And so I'm excited to see what she's going to share with us. So what are you feeling that you want to talk about?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because like we were just saying before, is like I don't feel like I know anything, it's just like as soon as you in a conversation, then the information flows. And also, as I was saying to you before, one of the things I like to say is, rather than teaching now, it's about sharing my knowledge and my wisdom, so that it encourages other people to do the same. Because like we were saying, we're all so different. We all, viewing the worlds, our own worlds in a very different way. So yeah, I mean, it just depends on where we go. I don't know where we're going to go with it, but I mean, let's start off with that activation at Glastonbury, if we can call it an activation, because who knows what that was. I mean, at that time, I think that was that in October as well, wasn't it? I think that you came. I think it was October.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think it was the July of that year. So actually, it's just been 6 years since I spontaneously started speaking. So on the 22nd, and I didn't know for a few years actually that was the Feast of Mary Magdalene that day. So that was really interesting. And then not long before that is when I started to hear that this Sophia, and of course to me the Sophia wasn't connected with anything, because I wasn't aware of that. To me it meant wisdom, and it was my wisdom that was coming forward. That's what it meant to me. That's what it still means to me. It's that wisdom side, that oracle side, if you want to call it that. But so that when we came down to Glastonbury that time, I remember you saying to me that somebody was coming who you wondered if I would help to bring them out of themselves. And of course at that time I'm going, well, I can't do it in front of people, and I'm not able to speak it out loud, because at that time it'd only been John that had heard me, and speaking to the trees and speaking to the animals. But before that, at that time I still hadn't really said it out loud. And I remember you asking me, and I think it was actually by Stonehenge was the first time I spoke out loud, was that time you asked us to sit on the ground, and because I wasn't feeling anything from the stones or anything like that, but it was just nice to be there, and there was a little group of us. And but then when we went to the Chalice Well and went into Chalice Well Gardens, and I think it was really late at night. I'm not sure if it wasn't like midnight or something like that.
Oh yeah, remember, because we actually had the cottage, and so we had access to the gardens at night. So we went out after everybody had gone. It was dark. Yeah,
it was really dark. Yeah, but it was perfect, wasn't it? It was really perfect. But I remember saying to myself, you can do this, you can do this, and then initiating it, somehow finding that strength and courage that's always there, obviously, to, you know, say to the other person, right, we'll hold hands. And we were literally stood next to the chalice well. You were sat on the wall behind us, I think, or like there's like a seating area, not a seat, it's like a stone seat, isn't it, almost, by there. And I remember my heart was in my mouth and I'm going, what if I can't speak? Because I think we all know that we don't know what's coming out of our mouth until we actually open it and start to speak, which is like I am now, actually.
Right.
But I think and at the time the other person didn't feel at that time that she was ready to do it. But I remember this language coming out of me and this confidence that this is me and I can do it. And I remember you were there as support for both of us in a way, I suppose, because you knew I hadn't really done it out loud. And so I was able to do that because obviously you were there and I trusted you, and, you know, and so I remember you telling me afterwards that just, you know, I think when you got back to the US that you started speaking, I think it was, wasn't it? But it was
Right.
like, for me, that was a pivotal time because that gave me the courage to say, this is who you are. You know, this isn't something you do. This is who you are. It's not, you know, to a certain extent, you can turn it on and off, because for me, I feel like I know that, you know, we differ in our perspective of what the light languages are. Like for me, and I did write that in the book, it was, it's almost like I see this iridescent resonant field, and we've all got our own resonant field vibrating outwards, and sometimes we say it's our energy field, but I could see this like resonant iridescent resonant field shimmering outwards, and then, you know, bumping up against other people's resonant field and crossing over, and then that returning back to me. And then when I was writing the book, I remember thinking, what is it that I actually am doing? You know, what is it I'm doing? And then I saw the word sonar really quickly and across my, you know, really clearly. And then I started to see whales and dolphins, and then hearing echolocation, and I'm going, oh my goodness, yeah, that's what that resonant field is doing. It's going out and returning back to me with the information. And then so the way I describe it to people when I'm speaking is that, and it can be just talking like we're doing now. I mean, that's, to me, is light languages as well. You know, it's a frequency that we are emitting, you know. And so the way I describe it is, I don't know what sounds are going to come out because I don't know what the resonant field is of those people who are around me. So
Right.
what comes back to me, I'm then verbalizing or vocalizing, and that's the way I feel, you know. And also whatever it is in the moment, if we're out in nature, that type of thing. So it's all encompassing really, but I don't know what it is that's going to come out. And sometimes that's quite nerve-wracking. Well, it used to be very nerve-wracking. Now I just go, whatever, you know.
Now you just flow with it. So
Yeah.
let me stop you a minute, because I wanted to, you mentioned Stonehenge.
Mm.
You remember there are recordings of that on
Yeah.
YouTube.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to hear,
they're very
her,
small recordings, but yeah,
they're short recordings, but yeah, it's on YouTube. Yeah. And here's the book that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Most of you already know this book. Most of you already have it. Okay. I'm sorry.
And you know what? I read through it every now and then because I forget what it is I put in there. You know, I have an idea, and I even find myself, because so many of my friends have said to me, it's really funny, but I can only get through it in bits. I can't read all the way through, you know.
Right.
And I'm the same when I go back through my things, because if I'm going to go and talk to people, I want to remember what it was I shared so that I can say, well, I put that in the book and I said this in the book or whatever. And sometimes I start nodding off and I'm like, oh my goodness. So there's so much power in that book. It's just unbelievable.
There is. I'm so happy that the intuition was followed and that we all four came together, because we do all four have different perspectives of what it is and how it occurs, and, you know, and you already know this, but they don't know this. The follow-up of it is a nightmare. Keeping up with the royalties and splitting the royalties is a nightmare, but it's all worth it, having four that I consider masters or, powerful women come together and share their perspectives. So I'm really happy that we did manage to do that. I only wish that I could have managed to get everybody's signature, for people want signed books. And since I'm the only one they have access to at the time, but
going back to what you were saying about the videos that you did, I think what was really fascinating at that time was seeing my hands moving, because and you probably know yourself, it's like as you're speaking, you're so like, I'll hear something different to what people are hearing when they hear me. I mean, I know, and I know that if I'm in a group, somebody will say, oh, I heard this sound, and somebody else will say, I saw these colors and this, because it's their experience of what they're hearing. But because I'm hearing the resonance within me, I'm not actually hearing what they're actually hearing. And it's the same with the hands. When I first became activated, just spontaneously, sitting in my living room, it was quite I thought my head was going to explode. Actually, it was just like this energy just came in. But I noticed my hands just moved on their own. And it was really interesting that the left hand was sort of, but lower down, sort of where the energy center, your Hara energy center is. It was almost like the left hand would sit there, and it was like the right hand was taking and putting out into the world. It was quite interesting. And then I was sort of observing as it was all happening, and it felt almost like I was playing a harp as well. It was really quite strange, because I'd never done anything like that before. But the hands were so spontaneous, and then you could sort of imagine these like golden light language symbols being created as well in my energy field. But when you filmed it, when we were at Stonehenge, it was so interesting to me to look back to watch how these hands were just moving spontaneously, and to be aware that, yes, I know the left hand tends to stay still and the other hand tends to move. And why is
so
that?
the left hand is your receiving hand, right?
Yeah, but it almost feels like that's holding the energy in a way, and then the right hand is giving it out. That's how it sort of feels to me. And I can't describe it any other way, really. But
but it makes sense. You would be receiving with your left hand and distributing it with your right.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
And on that video, I only focused on your hands.
But also what had happened at that time that was very, very interesting to me, because again, I know that even though I was speaking, I was trying to be really quiet, because we were in a public place, even though it was outside. But even the group that we were with, yourself and the other people, I was still a little bit self-conscious about what was I going to sound like. That was the main thing. What am I going to sound like? That I could sense that I was sort of holding myself a little bit, closed in a little bit. But what was really interesting was that spontaneously I pounded the earth by the sides of me. I just lifted my hands up and pounded onto the ground next to me, and I felt this ripple go out, and that all these people, it was like, to remind you that if you choose, you can now wake up, sort of thing.
Oh wow, it's like an announcement.
It was almost like a ripple like going out. It's like, time or whatever, I don't know. That's what it felt like to me. And that was so interesting, because again, it wasn't something that I thought, let me do this. And that I think is what things are so much more spontaneous now. That's like I was saying, I don't know what I'm going to talk about, until you start speaking, and then you're like, can't shut up then. And it's like, you've only got an hour,
No, we have as long as we need.
Oh. But I think that's the thing, is like, now it's so spontaneous what comes up, that you have to allow it to just surface. there's no sort of and I think the thing is, you don't want to anymore. I mean, in the beginning, you know, when you start speaking, it's like, you know, I better not, no, people think I'm crazy, or they'll think, oh gosh, what's she talking about? And of course, you know, we always have, what's the translation? You know, what is the translation? And one of the things I put in the book, because I had heard it really clearly for myself, and that was when I was holding a weekly group at my home, and you know, people were saying, you know, what is it? And a couple of people came to the group, and men actually, interestingly enough, wouldn't return until they knew what it was I was saying. And it was like, but I'd previously heard that it was to bypass the conscious mind, because obviously it's something, there's like a barrier, and the conscious mind is like, we're not letting that come through, you know, and so it bypasses that so that you can receive those frequencies. But what I heard really clearly was a postman delivers a package. You know, they come to your door, they don't know what's in the package that they're going to deliver. They knock on your door, and they don't stand there and tell you what's in the package, or wait for you to open the package and then tell you what to do with the contents. And I thought, you know what, that's so true. A postman delivers the package, the recipient then does with that what they will. And likewise, the recipient doesn't say to the postman, well, what do I do with these contents? It's yours. It's nothing to do with me. It's nothing to do with me or anyone, what you receive. That's the way I look at it. Because if I, you know, if this is multidimensional, which is what I believe it is, you know, and it's, you know, specific to whatever you hear, it's the same as if you hear somebody tapping on a drum or whatever, you're going to think of things will come into your awareness. That's nothing to do with the person doing the drum. They're just in their own little world doing what they're doing, isn't it? You know, so I think that's very much like this whole taking responsibility for ourselves now, that, you know, to me, that there shouldn't be a translation. And I know that, you know, I can get a feeling of you know, this is a supportive light languages, or this is a empowering light languages, or this is, I don't know, soothing or whatever, you know, I can get a sense of that, but not a translation. There isn't a translation, you know, and I think that's really important. And of course, that could almost take me straight into the whole Reiki thing. Because like on the weekend, I was doing a Reiki workshop, and it's not teaching Reiki. It was sharing what I have researched about Reiki and restoring it. I mean, this is what my friend Julie and I were doing when we were sharing Diamond Light Reiki. You know, it was called Diamond Light Reiki because it was not about teaching the Western hands-on healing modality that is called Reiki. It was about restoring the integrity of the word. And people don't realize, because this is another thing, like with the whole labels and things like that, like you say a word and straight away your brain goes into its filing cabinets and it pulls out the description for the word. So it's like, we don't need to think, because the brain has now told us what that means. And so, you know, it's the same with the light languages. So if you don't know what it means, you know, unless you can accept that you don't know what it means, you're just going to be pondering, and, well, you know, did somebody put a spell on me? Did they do this, that, and the other? You know, you just don't know. And it's the same with the Reiki, because to the Japanese people, the word Reiki doesn't mean universal life force energy, which is what we've been taught. That's the key. That's key. That's what the key is, not the Rei part. And it's not 2 words, it's 1 word as well. You know, we've been told it's Rei and Ki, and it's just Reiki. And to the Japanese people, and to those who were you know, the turn of the 20th century, who were teaching students or sharing their wisdom, because this is what, you know, again, we're not Japanese, we don't understand their, you know, a lot of them were Shinto and Buddhism, and they were doing daily meditation, daily chanting. You know, the Japanese chanted what was called Kotodama, and that really is so powerful. And luckily for me, I was taught that when I was being, you know, introduced to Reiki. So for me, over the years, I've just, as I was, you know, having students myself, I wanted to make sure that I actually shared as close as I could, you know, and of course then each time it changed, because I then came across new information, because as we change, you know, more information comes to us, you know, more to share. So, but to clarify for the Japanese people, the word Reiki actually wasn't part of the teachings, it was in the description. And Reiki actually means their ancestral selves, or the ancestors, or the essence of the ancestors. So, as I would say, our true self, who we really are. That's what they're connecting to through their chanting, through their daily rituals, and that type of thing. And like, I loved sharing with people the symbols that we have been taught here in the West were teaching aids. They were nothing to do with the mantra or the Jumon, which, so most people, if they've been attuned to Reiki 1, for instance, will potentially have been shown a symbol, and they call that symbol Shokare. But that wasn't called Shokare. The mantra or the Jumon is Shokare. The symbol is symbol 1. So the symbols weren't the mantra, because they were introduced much later. So the first shirushi, as they're called, the symbols or the characters that we think of as Shokare, actually comes from a Shugendo monastery or Shugendo religion, and it means to return to Kami, Kami, and that's the mystical and the magical, like trees and nature, that type of thing, or return to who you are, return to your true self. It reminds you to come back to your source. So that was why they used that one, because a lot of the time it was about connecting to nature, because the Japanese teachers taught their students, you are nature, be as nature, you know, and of course to the Japanese, nature was everything. It was who they were, you know, and of course we don't have that same understanding. And so the second symbol is what people would call Seiheki, but that's the Jumon, that's the mantra. Seiheki is symbol 2, and that is what they call a katakana. It's part of a Japanese character. So the Japanese character is called kanji, and so that's a part, it's a sound element of the whole word, because sometimes they were very confusing, because before World War II there were over 50,000 Japanese kanji to learn, and then after World War II that was shortened to like 2,000.
Wow.
Can you get your head around that? I mean, that's crazy, isn't it? You know, but they wanted to modernize so that people could learn it. So the Japanese culture is very, very different to the Western culture, because for one as well, they were, you know, they were cut off for over 200 years. They isolated themselves, and it wasn't until I think it was 1860 something, the British bombed them to force them to British ships bombed 2 harbors on 2 consecutive years to force them to trade, you know, and then they realized, oh, actually we haven't got the might that these have, you know, we need to modernize. But then the other 2 symbols that we are called, and of course, you know, people were charging thousands and thousands of pounds or dollars for these magical glyphs, these magical symbols. And then the symbols that people call Honsha Shonen or Daikomyo, which are the last 2 symbols, which are Japanese kanji. They are commonly used words in Japan. They are not magical glyphs, but because we're not Japanese, we don't know that. They were a teaching aid for those students who couldn't connect to the energy through the chanting of the Jumon and the resonating of the Kotodama. And I highly recommend, if you're interested in light languages, go and listen to Kotodama being chanted, especially by the Japanese. I mean, the like, you know, I was sharing with you the other day this, or we've talked about it before, you know, the whole throat singing, and that resonance is to connect to the earth. And of course that would have been what the Japanese sounded like when they chanted the Kotodama, you know.
So I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump in here. So whenever whenever I post the podcast, I usually put links at the bottom of your episode.
Okay.
So when we end here, can you send me a link for that? And then we'll give people a link to go and listen to it.
Yeah, definitely. That'd be good.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Well,
I have to do that while I remembered it.
I get you. But I mean, it's really interesting because, you know, from when we look back on the journey that Reiki has been on, you know, when it came to the West, it was, you know, there'd been a world war and the Japanese were the enemy, you know, so anything to do with Japan or anything like that had to be Christianized, you know, in a way, because otherwise it wouldn't be accepted. And so it was diluted so much. But then when you look, okay, somebody's created their own method but called it somebody else's method, and that is very un-Japanese. You know, a Japanese, if they change a method, they have to give it their own name. So a lot of us who were empowered, as you know, if you use a Kotodama, it's called an empowerment because you have a Reiju empowerment, which is what they would do. And that's, so again, there actually is, and this is going to be so controversial, but I'm going to throw it in there anyway. There are no Reiki masters. There are no Reiki masters. So the word master was put on, so Chijiro Hayashi, who was the Japanese military doctor, he was a naval doctor. He actually taught Hawaii Takata, who was an American Japanese woman. Her parents were Japanese. She was born in Hawaii. He taught her his method. He didn't teach her a Zui method or anything. He taught her Chijiro Hayashi's method, and he allowed her to teach his method. So then, of course, you know, the war came and one thing and another. She changed the method to suit the Christian students because she didn't think they would do the daily chanting like the Buddhists, you know, and of course nowadays anything to do with like Tai Chi, Qigong, anything that's you know, to do like that with energy work is actually embraced by most Westerners now. And of course back then it wasn't. So she's introduced it in a way but changed it, and it became a healing method, you know, rather than a method of spiritual enlightenment. Like the Japanese, it was about attaining Satori, which was enlightenment. So when you look at it, it's no longer what the Japanese were doing. And of course then she gave these magical symbols, because she didn't know what they were, a much greater emphasis, and you know, and said that they were, you know, these magical symbols, when in actual fact they're common in Japan. You know, children have to learn them in school, have to learn them the to be able to draw the kanji or write the kanji. So it's really interesting. Go on, sorry.
Yeah. So they took, it was a personal practice, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
It was meant to be a personal empowerment practice,
Yes.
spiritual practice,
Yes.
and they took it and created a healing modality out of it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So Chijiro Hayashi, who was a Japanese medical doctor, a naval doctor. So because there were so many ratings to one doctor in the Japanese military, they needed an emergency treatment. And so what they had noticed is that through this daily chanting, obviously you're expanding your frequency, you're creating this more, you know, just a greater you know, presence, aren't you, you know? And so they noticed that as a side effect, that created a healing. But originally, because obviously Reiki came from China, it was called Ling Qi. It was a Chinese method, and
not a Japanese method.
No, and a lot of the things like I think it was 540 CE, so current time, that the Japanese actually took the Chinese writing and created their own writing. They actually didn't have a written language until that time. It was all sound. It was all about the chanting and the resonance. So this is why I'm always fascinated with Japan, and especially with the light languages, because that connecting to the earth, that resonating through your body, has already been a huge part of, you know, the past of our ancestors. And, you know, and for me, and we all know that we've been, you know, directed in another direction, haven't we, over the centuries. So for me, and seeing that the language has changed, you know, like I can tell you that from the Welsh language, you know, as well, that's how it's been changed and how they've tried to get rid of that language. So for the Japanese perspective, you know, it was their culture, it's their whole belief, but we can't know that unless we go and immerse ourselves in that.
Right.
So Chijiro Hayashi, as a naval military doctor, wanted to learn this system where he could heal, or at least do, you know, help some of the other people in the Japanese military. So he then created his own hands-on, he created his own hand positions. He you know, recorded them. They were actually used in Japanese hospitals in the 1930s. And what he did was, he had more than one person in his clinic putting hands on. It wasn't like one-to-one. So in the Japanese, I suppose you could call them teachers. I mean, it's not the same word really that they would use. They would do what was called tiate, which was a hand healing, and they would use what they call the fire finger, and they would direct it onto the acupuncture point. And that's how they would initiate the energy flow. Of course, again, we think, to me, what's happened in the West as well is that, you know, there's this whole thing of, you need healing, you're aiming to get somewhere by healing, by clearing all these patterns, but we're doing it spontaneously. I think that's something that happens naturally through our life. And for me personally, that whole thing of, because what I heard really clearly again was, and this is quite a few years ago now, you never needed healing because you were never broken, you were always returning to wholeness.
Right.
And to me, that's what it is. All our experiences are always returning us to our true self, to who we really are, you know. And we're all doing it in different ways, you know. We don't need to search anymore. And I think, you know, at some point you see all these different modalities and different things, and you think, one of them's going to fix me, one of them will actually, eventually I'll be right, and I'll be, you know, I'll be able to be enlightened. And of course, that's not really anymore what we're doing. We're here to be human. That was something that Mikao Usui, who is credited as being the inventor of Reiki, and I mean, I couldn't believe that. I read that on Wikipedia. I couldn't believe it, because he didn't actually call his system Reiki. It was nothing to do with Reiki, what his system was called. That was then Hawaii Takata that did that called it Usui Reiki. She called herself Chijiro Hayashi's successor, and that Chijiro Hayashi was Mikao Usui's successor, when in actual fact he'd already died, you know. So, go on, you're going to say something.
So that brings up an interesting point for me personally. So being a Westerner,
yeah,
and it is unfortunate, but we do tend here in the US to take other people's systems and make them our own. And so I was taught Reiki and certified as a Reiki master. These are just words.
yeah,
and given the rights to teach Reiki, right? And so I did do that for, I don't know how many years. I did teach Reiki, and I did what they call attune people to Reiki. And I stopped doing that because I realized at some point that I wasn't following the syllabi, right? I could no longer follow what they said Reiki was, and I couldn't teach that because I felt as though I was doing Dr. Usui, because that's what I was taught. I felt as though I was doing him a disservice because I just could not follow what they said I should be teaching.
Yeah.
And so thank you for clearing that up for me. And the other thing I found was that, and this is controversial, and my Reiki relatives their heads are probably going to spin. I have never found Reiki to heal anyone, physically heal anyone. What I always found, what I noticed when I attuned somebody, what I noticed was that they would expand spiritually, and they would balance out sometimes emotionally. Things would change in their lives, right? Because they would expand.
I can tell you why now. Do you want me to tell you
Okay,
why?
good. But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
thank you for
Yeah.
making that more clear to me, because I always intuitively knew that what I was teaching people was wrong. And so I stopped doing it.
Yeah.
I would still give people what we're calling attunements, empowerments. I would still give people my version of empowerments, which it turns out it has nothing to do with Reiki. But I did find that it would help them spiritually.
Right.
So,
Remind
yeah.
me to tell you about the master thing as well, because I didn't finish about that. But
Okay.
so not necessarily Mikao Usui, but Toshihiro Iguchi was Mikao Usui's sort of head student and close friend, and he created his own system based upon the teachings of Mikao Usui, and he introduced this an empowerment for his students, basically, because he wanted to emulate what Mikao Usui was doing naturally. He emanated this amazing energy. And so he wanted to emulate that. And so he created this, or added, not created, he added a blessing, if you like, to his students. So when they'd come to the dojo and they'd do their training and one thing and another, he would then give them all a blessing. And that became part of the 5 elements of Reiki. And I'm always amazed that people, it's part of the basic system, and it's not really taught. We know about the precepts again. We've learned Hawaii Takata's precepts. I mean, that was something I've done. I've created in my booklet is like the Buddhist precepts were what Mikao Usui based his on, and then each teacher created their own set, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's why I say I don't teach, I share my knowledge and my wisdom, because if you're teaching, then you teach something and you say this is how you should do it, but none of us can do that. We can only ever be ourselves in that. So it's the same with what you were saying. So the Zui Reiki Ryoho Gakkai, which was created by the Japanese naval officers, which Chijiro Hayashi was one of them, they then changed or created their own system. They didn't change the system, they created their own system, and they introduced what was called a Reiju empowerment. So that's basically what Toshihiro Iguchi had been doing in giving these Denju empowerments to his students. So the Reiju empowerment, and that's also chanting the Kotodama. So that's how I was taught, was that you did a Reiju empowerment, and that comes under the 5 elements that you receive regular Reiju empowerments. And the reason why you have a Reiju empowerment is because the Shihan, 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 which is what we would sort of call a Reiki master. A Shihan in the Japanese perspective was somebody who was now considered to be able to pass on knowledge. They were a trusted mentor, and they were able to then pass on the knowledge to the lower students, if you like. So the master, not really a master, but like Mikao Usui, for instance, wouldn't teach the lower students. That would be the senior students that would teach the lower ones. So basically what they did was they gave a Reiju empowerment, and that was the Shihan. That was the person that was this respected mentor, to pass on the knowledge, to give that knowledge. And they would do a Reiju empowerment. And what they would do in that empowerment is basically saying, I am you and you are me. We're in each other's frequency. So the lower student then raises their frequency by being in the frequency. And this is why you're saying, when you notice that the students actually did have an impact, because they were matching your frequency in that moment. And that's what happens. And so they'd have these regular empowerments from the Shihan. And again, if you listen to have you ever heard of Morihei Ueshiba? He's the founder of Aikido. Have you heard of
No.
Aikido? Well,
Yeah.
Aikido is a Japanese martial arts, isn't it? Well, I mean, I highly recommend people go and look, because he was a philosopher as well, and some of the things that he shared were amazing. But there was one one quote that he gave, and I couldn't find it when I was sharing it last weekend. And basically, one of the students said to him, you know, when I'm here in the dojo training with you, I can do all the things that you can do, but when I go home and I train on my own, I can't do the same. I can't do it in the same way. I'm paraphrasing. And Morihei Ueshiba said, and that is because when you are in the dojo with me, you are me. And he always said, I am the universe. And that is why he can be undefeated, because you're trying to fight the universe. That's the way he believed. And he talked a lot about Kotodama, and that was the chanting, and you can imagine that that's what they used to do. So going back to the symbols, the use of the symbols as well, for those students who weren't Shinto and Buddhist, who chanted constantly, you know, that was their life. I mean, we don't see that in the West. That is their daily life. You know, they're part of nature, they're chanting, they're following these promises to themselves to, you know, to be better, or, you know, not be frightened and that type of thing. And I'm going to lose my train of thought now with that. I don't know where I was going with that one. I do that all the time, you know me. But yeah, so the symbols, so what they would do, and they would do it in a dojo, like say when they're training for Aikido and things like that. And the Japanese Kiko, which is like Qigong in Japan, they would hang a large silk at the head of the dojo, and there would be calligraphy on it, a symbol or kanji. And the students would chant, but they would focus their mind on this symbol so that they brought their awareness in. And that was what they did for those students who couldn't connect with earth key or heavenly key, or the key of oneness, because that was what he was also teaching, was this state of oneness, that they would, if they couldn't do, you know, the chanting, and of course chanting took years and years and years, because it was who they were. So the ones that they wanted to do more quickly, they used a symbol to be able to pull their attention in, and then they can connect with the energy more quickly. But once they did, the symbol was discarded. It wasn't part of a system in a way. So unfortunately, the symbols, which were what people paid thousands of pounds for, you know, and to me, that's where the distortions come in, you know, and I know so many people the same as myself, and I loved connecting with the energy of what I thought was Reiki. But what we have to remember is, when we raise our frequency, whether it's through that modality or a different one or whatever it is, we've taken ourselves there. You know, I was saying this to the group I was working with on Sunday. How many teachers are there? You know, these masters. How many are there? And some even call themselves grandmasters. I mean, you know, that is such a Western thing. It's nothing to do with Japan. I mean, the idea that there's this hierarchy, for one thing, you know, is again very Western and very you know, I've got the knowledge and you have to pay me lots of money for it. And instead of what we're doing now is like, we just share who we are, you know, we share with everybody freely, you know. And so the whole master thing was the original thing. The reason why there's a Reiki master is because on Hawaii Takata's certificate that Chijiro Hayashi signed, he said he was a master. Of course, he's translating from Japanese. He was a master of the Uzui system for I think it was healing with no medicines or something like that. So he's trying to translate it, and then he's put that she Hawaii Takata was the master of his method, that she was now a master. In other words, she's qualified. Now, to us in the West, a master is, well, I'm a master, masters of the universe type thing, and it's like, I've mastered that thing. And that's where we've got it wrong. So I've heard people for years and years and years go, oh yes, I'm a Reiki master. I am a Reiki master, all that type of thing. And it's like, what is that all about? I mean, I even had one woman say to me a few years ago, oh, well, I've done Reiki level 1. And I'm like, great, great. Good for you for taking that step. But what is it about that? And again, that's that whole thing. You can see where it's been distorted from it being, a friend of mine, and she's lovely, she really is, and she churns them out, Reiki practitioners, churning them out. And I mean, I'm not on Facebook anymore, haven't been for a while, but she used to put up all the time 4 more healers into the world. Well, again, we're getting people to believe they have this power to heal other people. And I've seen people take on this, well, I'm now a healer. I can go and help everyone, because we want to save the world. We want to make people feel better. We all want to do that. But how many people have done it at their own expense? And something that I say a lot, and it's so, so true, and it's simple. You will only receive, whatever you receive is only ever at the frequency of the person that gave it you. So if we're plugged into something that's now distorted, we're constantly in a distortion. And so for me, the reason why I really love restoring the integrity of Reiki, what the Reiki means, it means ancestral selves, ancestors, who we really are, the essence of who we really are. In restoring that, it gets us all to see that whatever journey we're on, and whoever we are and whatever we're doing, is the right thing for us. But if we try to emulate people from the past by doing a system, and this is like you say, we're all changing I mean, there's nothing wrong with the fact that Hawaii Takata changed their system. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the fact that her 22 Reiki masters all added new age things into their, like the chakras, for instance. The Japanese never did chakras. They did the 3 energy centers, which they called the 3 diamonds. You had the lower hara, then you had the heart energy center, and the forehead energy center. They didn't use chakras, and that was in ancient Sanskrit. And again, that's been distorted because there were thousands of different chakra systems, and people would work with different ones to connect with what they called deities, but they knew that the deities were actually other aspects of themselves. So again, there's all this distortion. But I was saying to the group, we forget the power that's below our own feet in the land where we are. We don't need to go and do Indian modalities. I'm not saying it's not, you can't if you want to, obviously. We don't need to go back to when they were doing the Reiki, they weren't doing Reiki, they were doing, because Azui's method was called the Zui Do, the way of Azui. And then it was changed to whoever had their own modality. And if they changed it, they had to, by out of honor, because obviously the Japanese were very honorable. We're not like that. That's not our way, So it's very difficult. So the thing I say to people is, one, remember your own frequency. Are you in integrity all the time? Because that's where your frequency lies.
Right.
And then, are you just being you? Are you being true to who you are? And remember that whatever it is you're doing it's okay. You don't have to emulate, because in a way we're standing on their shoulders. That's going back. If you start going back to those modalities, you're plugging into something that was at a lower frequency. So we're all of us creating our own way, because we're now creating that way of our own frequency. you know. And I've noticed for myself over the last few years, I feel almost like I've gone around the house unplugging, you know, taking the plug out of the sockets, because I'm not plugged into that anymore. I'm not plugged into that anymore. I'm plugged into me more and more and more, which then
Right.
allows me to gain the knowledge from there, or you know, gain the knowledge from that place. Or if somebody's got wisdom to share, you know, does it resonate with me? And if not, I don't need to take it on board. And I think that's, like you were saying, we're all so different, and we've all got something to share, but we don't always know that we've got something to share. And again, that's going back to when we were at the Chalice Well and you encouraged me to, you know, to actually share my light languages, which I now call diamond light languages, because I align with the sacred octahedron and the diamond, you know, the diamond light sort of thing, that frequency. For me, everything that comes through me is actually coming through my diamond light grid. So to me, I call them diamond light languages.
So let me ask you, I was watching you when you were talking about the 3 energy centers. That is the diamond, isn't it?
Well, yeah, we have like 8 energy centers with the diamond, but
Okay.
the Chinese,
because you have the outside points.
Yeah, you have the front and the back. So basically you have the, and again, it aligns perfectly for me for what they were doing with Mikao Sui when he was training his students. And of course he trained each student differently, because they were all very different, you know.
Right, and they needed different things, right?
Exactly, yeah. They were so different. Some trained for a long time, but the Japanese didn't need to move on to a next level. You know, we're like, okay, I've done level 1, I need to get my level 2 done now, and I need to have a certificate, and I need to all those things. Why do we? Because it's distorted, and we're told you can't be that thing if you don't have proof, if you don't have the lineage, you know. That's given it some kind of credibility, and of course it's fake, it's false, you know. And I'm sorry if it upsets people. I mean, I absolutely loved Reiki. I mean, it was my thing. It was like, but I always understood it was a way of life for me. I didn't want to teach people. I didn't want to actually do treatments on people. I did eventually when people asked me, but I'm sure most people, when you know that you're raising your frequency, I've had people sitting in a room with me and going, do you know what, suddenly I'm going really hot and I don't know why. And it's because, you know, there's an interaction going on. So we don't have to necessarily do mantras or chant or do, you know, symbolic things to just be who we are and emanate. That's that resonant frequency going out, you know. We don't have to do it. But I want to just share as well, just quickly, I'd written it down. Let me see if I got it still handy. If not, I know it off by heart anyway. But I just wanted to share with people on the weekend a timeline. I can do it off by heart anyway. So when people are attuned to Reiki, they're usually given a lineage, and they're told that this lineage takes them straight back to Mikao Usui. And that lineage, in a way, was to give it credibility, you know, to make it connected to some sort of Japanese healing thing, and it wasn't. That's not to say there aren't Japanese healers, because there was a huge movement of healers in Japan at that time, you know, which all went underground after the Second World War. Because most people don't realize that Japan was ruled by the Allies until 1952, and then it was handed back over. And then a Japanese government was chosen by the Allies to rule Japan. So, and then you had to have a special license if you were a healer or you did anything. Because remember, it's all about magic and mystery in Japan. You know, the Kotodama is like the sound, power words, spirit words, words of the soul, that type of thing. It's so amazing, and I highly recommend people go and look at that. So, you know, so the Japanese, that went underground because you needed a special license, so that became hidden. So Mikao Usui died in 1926. Chijiro Hayashi was teaching his students in 1930. He didn't become Shihan until after Mikao Usui died. So more than likely it was Toshihiro Oguchi who was his teacher. And then he attuned, or not, he didn't attune Hawaii Takata, he taught her his method. That was what he did. So she wasn't actually when Chijiro Hayashi died, Hawaii Takata was only just teaching her first level students, and that was in the late 1930s. So she'd only started then teaching first level students. She didn't teach her Reiki masters until the 1960s, 30 years after her teacher died. You know, so she's not passing on a system, she's creating her own system, and there's nothing wrong with that. There isn't anything wrong with that. But again, we're being taught, because she didn't understand necessarily I mean, in the booklet I've got quotes that she's done from her diary. I've got quotes that she gave in an interview trying to explain what Reiki was, or what, and it wasn't until the 1960s she actually started calling her method Reiki. It wasn't called that until the 1960s. And so what they believe is she'd gone back to Japan to start trying to teach Chijiro Hayashi's method in Japan, only to discover that his wife, Chi Hayashi, was still teaching that method. So she couldn't teach that method because it was still, you know, being taught in, or the hands-on healing modality that he had created was still being taught in Japan. So she came away and then created a story of Dr. Mikao Uzui, you know, Christian theologian, on a quest to find out how Jesus did healing, you know, and then called it Uzui. It's usually, most people are attuned to what's called Uzui Shiki Ryoho. That's what most people are attuned to. I mean, people have changed it. I've seen people change the shirushi, the symbols, to fit in with their websites. I mean, the distortion is unbelievable. But one of the things that most people know is that when Hawaii Takata died, her Reiki masters had all got together, because she said it was an oral tradition, that there was no records to be kept, nobody could record their lessons, and nobody could, you know, and they had to pass it on orally. So of course they all found that they all had different symbols. Again, the symbols were either Japanese phrases, a katakana, and a symbol from a Shugendo monastery. And of course the Shugendo is very important, because we all hear that Mikao Uzui did a 21-day fast, which is when he received the enlightenment, and this great Reiki came over his head, and that's when he created Reiki. That's what we hear. But the Shugendo, the 21-day fasting, is actually a Shugendo practice, and you would not do that unless you were actually you know, pretty established in that type of thing. It's not a sort of thing anybody could do, you know. So we know he you know, was prolific in so many different things. You know, he had all sorts of martial arts training, and all kinds of things that he was able to then share with his own students. But so once all these students had discovered, these Reiki masters had discovered that they all had different symbols, but for some reason the symbols seemed to work. And it's like, well, how can the Reiki symbols work? Well, we must be because we're connecting to the Reiki energy. But again, we now know that we all have our own frequency. We're all emitting our own resonant frequency. So if we, like I was saying before, with, you know, how many hundreds of thousands, millions of Reiki masters are there out there? Why are we drawn to a particular one to teach us? You know, because we know that's going to be a frequency exchange. You know, we don't go and say to ourselves, you know what, I really want to do Reiki, and I'm going to, you know, find somebody. We usually are drawn to somebody. You know, most people I know of are drawn to somebody, and then quite often we don't stay connected to that person down the line, even though they've taught us what we need to teach, you know, what we've needed to learn. But a lot of the time it's you know, our own frequency. We're on our own journey all the time, aren't we? You know, we're not, you know, for me, that's what I've always realized, is that whoever's walking alongside me on my journey, but it's always Rachel's journey, you know. And when Neil died, when my husband died, that actually, I realized that so strongly, because I then came more forward, the strength of me came forward to be able to obviously deal with that situation. But then when I look back, I can see that was always happening, that was always starting to come forward. But I realized that he was always a companion on my journey, but it was always my journey. And
Right.
that's the same with all of us, you know. We drift away from people, we drift away from teachers, because we no longer need that exchange, because we're now on to the next thing, you know. Go on, you speak, because I'm jabbering away here, aren't I?
Well, that's the whole point, is for you to share. They hear me talk all the time. But yeah, I was just, you know how I work. So as you're talking, my mind is like processing things and going, oh yeah, remember that one. Yeah, remember that one, you know. But yeah. So it is true. I mean, there are so many people in my life existence who come in at very pivotal moments, and they spend a little time, and then they go off in other directions. And a good example, I was just sharing this yesterday, and you've heard me say this, that there were two sisters in particular that went with me to the UK, and when we got back, that was it. That's all they needed.
Yeah.
That's all they needed from me, was to make that connection, you know. And they were sisters that were so dear to my heart, you know. And so I was a little crushed, you know. Oh my God, you know, how could they just split off from me? You know, how is that? But yeah, after a while you do realize, you know, that we each have our own path, and sometimes we come together for a moment to get a particular key that we need. You know, like you said, our frequencies start to resonate with each other, and we get that key, and that's all we needed.
Yeah. And that's why
You know,
it can be
and
quite a lonely journey, can't it? You know,
it
at
is.
times, you know,
It
I mean,
is.
I've noted it from being a child, how lonely I always felt.
Yeah.
And again, you know, you hear that you can be in a crowd of people and you still feel lonely. And I don't know about other people, but I always used to feel like I'm on the outside looking in all the time, you know. And it's going dark, so I don't know if I'm still all right on my picture, am I? Yeah.
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah.
Starting to get cloudy. We might be getting some more rain now, you know, more rain. But I think that's the thing, is like, you know, you're always on the outside looking in, and like for me, it's like I want to sometimes join in, I want to go forward, but there's always this thing of you don't need to, or sometimes it's like I can talk, and other times it's like just listen. You can't, and no words will come out, you know, because you're meant to just be present. And I think that, you know, that there's I mean, I've heard it many times, but I saw it and heard it myself, because I receive a lot of things through metaphor that help me to make sense sometimes of the world around me. But something I say to people a lot of time is, lighthouses don't walk up and down the beach looking for people to save. You know, they stand still, they stand firm, they take all the bashing from the waves, but they still shine their light. And people can see the light if they choose to. And if they need the light, it's always there. And I think that we get, if you like, pulled into that human world, you know, and that is what we're here for, to be human. That was something Miko Usui taught his students, was how to be a good human. That was part of their journey. You know, and this whole enlightenment thing, you know, we've been taught, get out of the body, meditate, get out. And of course, that again is an inversion. It's about embodying who we really are into this physical body, you know, and that is, I think, when you look back at the teachings of these Japanese people, you know, Mikao Uzui was one of many at that time. He wasn't the only person. And in fact, he wasn't the person who first started using the word Reiki in the description of his method. And another guy actually wrote a book and called it, had Reiki in the title. So it wasn't, people think Reiki is just specific to this hands-on healing modality, and it isn't. You know, we've lost that understanding that there are different cultures around the world, and the Japanese culture is completely different to ours in so many ways. And in back in the day, it was even more. You know, they were still wearing kimonos and traditional costumes and things like that. You know, and they would have seemed so like somebody from another planet to people like us, and maybe that was another planet, you know.
Right.
So this is the thing, you know, we try in the West, we want everything to fit in our box. We want it all to sound like, you know, speak all the same language, and it's got to fit into all these little pigeonholes. And again, I go on and on and on to people about these labels, you know, that again, you know, the label mother is one I use all the time. So if we say the word mother, our brain again goes into its filing cabinets and it picks out the information or the description of what a mother is, and oh, hang on a minute, you're not going along with the description. You're a bit out of, you know, a bit out of the way of that. So you must be doing something wrong, you know. And this is the thing, when we again, like people say to me all the time, oh, you're a vegan, you know. And I'll say, no, I'm a human. I just follow a vegan diet. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't call you a carnivore. You know, what's with the labels? And we're so now, you've got to be so politically correct, and you can't say that because it might offend that person. Well, it offends me not to say that, you know what I mean? It's like, where's the balance? We're so being pulled in every different direction that we have to be true to ourselves, no matter what. And that is really, really difficult when you can be, you know, we're basically being pulled all over the place, fragmented in every different direction. You can't say that, you can't do that, you must behave in this way, you must follow these, you know, these labels and stick to these patterns. And all the time we're just, you know, throwing these patterns away, aren't we, you know, and becoming more and more. And that's why I said to you before, whenever anyone's asked me, you know, well, what's your bio, or what can I put about you, revealing my true self. That's my journey. It's just to reveal who I really am, to embody the truth of me. And the truth of me is not the truth of somebody else.
Right.
And it's hard. That is very difficult. You know, it's really difficult, because if somebody, for instance, like you say, for you and I, you know, if we have very different views on a lot of things. And sometimes it's like, well, how do you have a conversation with somebody if they're not going to get what it is you're trying to say? And then they're not going to mirror back to you, if in a way, what you're saying. Do you know what I mean? Because we're all mirroring one another, you know. And so if you're needing that, not needing's the wrong word, but in order to sort of survive these times, we need to remember who we are. And of course, we've been given all these labels, we've been given, you know, they've plugged in all these lower vibrational frequencies to keep us from seeing who we really are. And of course, we're smashing that wide open now. But then who are we? Because we've been so used to being contained. We've been so used to being in a box, you know, and I quite often, again, might be a bit controversial for people, I heard many years ago that the lid was coming off the spirituality box. And I saw this sort of progression from the control structure of religion. People were leaving leaving the religion. So, well,
Right.
how can we contain them? Right, we'll create a new box and we'll call it spirituality, and they've got more freedom, they can get out of their heads and da 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 da. But we're still going to contain them. And a lot of the words that people use are actually still religious terms. And again, we know from, you know, what we've talked about with light languages and things like that, that there's magic and there's frequency in those words. So why has the language been distorted? why are we using certain words to describe what, you know, who we're becoming, if you like? And it's difficult, isn't it? So it's difficult sometimes to have conversations with people who don't resonate with you. We say that all the time, that, oh, that person's not resonating. What does that actually mean? You know, and we can connect with people who, like I often say within the Diamond Light community, you know, we're all holding a frequency. It doesn't matter what our world looks like, what our life looks like. You could be on your arse, you know, you could be really having a difficult time, or you could be a millionaire, but you're still holding a certain frequency. And that's why we tend to all gather together in our tribes, for want of a better word, you know. But I mean, that's a phrase, isn't it? Got to find my tribe, got to find my tribe, got to find my tribe. And it's like, that will come. It always comes. People always come when the time's right, because it's your resonant frequency. You know what I mean?
Right. So it's not, I've got this going through my brain, and I think I need to just say it. So it's not a good analogy that I'm going to use, but it's the only one I can come up with at the moment. Because like you said, and so many other people that have said, the English language is so distorted and so full of hooks and control patterns, right? But we use the English language, and so we use it to the best of our ability. But so in the way of people going from the church to spirituality, the word spirituality, what came to my mind was, and like I said, it's not a positive analogy, but it's accurate at this moment. It's like an addict. Okay. So in AA, I won't say they say this, but you see this in AA, they go from being, say, a drug addict to being addicted to sugar, or being addicted to coffee, or being addicted to cigarettes, right? Or being addicted to sex. It's trading one addiction for the other, because we need to have something to believe in. There's that deep need to have a belief system, and it's usually someone else telling us what our belief system is. And so people were disheartened by the church and the church's teachings, and so they said, oh, spirituality, I can align with that because it's more free. No one's telling me what to do, you know, no one's telling me what to believe and how to believe it and how to act and how to practice. So I'm going to go to spirituality because it's all airy fairy and woo woo, and you know, there's so much magic in it, and there's so much freedom. Yeah, there's so much freedom in it. I can be who I am. And the same thing happens, I find the same thing happens with what people call Native American spirituality, which is not even accurate, okay? But it's the words that they use to describe it. And I find so many people that will go from the church wanting to learn to be Indian. They want to learn how to be Indian, you know, and practice Indian ways. And me personally, that's such a joke, because the basic principles of being Indian is living with the earth and living in good relationship with yourself and everything. You don't need to go sit, you know, on the hill to do that. You don't need to go sit in sweat lodge to do that. You can do it, right? It's our basic nature, but human beings need to be able to connect with something, and in particular, a group. They have to align with another group that thinks the way that they do, so that they feel complete. You know, if you don't feel the way that I do, I can't talk to you anymore.
Well, it's almost like you've got an identity, and that person reinforces your identity. It's like, I'm safe because now I can identify as that. Right. I mean, how many people that you know, years ago in the spirituality community, you know, oh, I've got a Native American guide and all that. It was the thing to have, and you were somebody if you had a Native American guide, you know, and it was like, you know, and to me, I'm not saying, you know, again, it's not, I'm not trying to be you know, put anyone down or anything, because we all move through that. But to me, there's again, like you were saying, the English language is so distorted, and this is why it's now being spoken all over the world, and it's the language to speak, you know. And you know, like here in the UK, obviously that's our native language, but where I live in Wales, it's like there's a different language, and that language is the oldest language in Europe, but they try to destroy the language. And you will hear people constantly
Exactly. Yeah,
saying,
exactly. Yeah.
you know, oh, it's a dying language, it's a dead language. No, it isn't, you know. But this
Yeah.
was another thing I was trying to explain to the people on Sunday at the workshop I was doing. So we don't understand that the Japanese kanji, for instance, doesn't really have a literal translation. It's like the light languages, you know. And to me, the light languages is the voice of energy, and it's who we are, you know. It's from the earth, if you like. It's who we are. It's that whole connection. And you know, and I was saying to them on the weekend, when you think about it, I'm losing my train of thought here. You know, when you get so many things come in your mind, don't they? You lose your train of thought. So the Japanese kanji doesn't necessarily have a literal translation. It's an essence, it's a feeling, and the words can change depending on the context and depending on who's speaking the words and who they're speaking the words to. Now, we don't understand that because in English it's this, and that's the translation, you know. And I was saying to them, like for the Welsh, for instance, people don't always realize that certain words don't actually mean what you think they mean. Like, and I was sharing with them, there's a lovely phrase, and it's just such a beautiful thing. And the phrase is "Dod yn ôl at fy ngoed," and what that phrase means is to return to a balanced state of mind. Okay. Now, if you weren't Welsh and you didn't know that meaning, you would think that those words actually meant to return to a balanced state of mind. But the words in the translation mean to return to my trees. So it's not the literal translation. It's what that feeling, that energy brings you to a balanced state of mind because you've gone back to the trees. So the phrase means to return to a balanced state of mind, but that's not its translation. And we have other things like that here. Like I was saying to you the other day, you know, that long word, you know, the longest place name that everybody knows it's the longest place name in the UK. What people don't understand is it's the directions of how to get there, you know, but it's become the place name. And we have so many places like that here, you know, and even people here would be very much known by a different name depending on what their trade was or what they were known for, you know. So the language has been so distorted and so corrupted, you know. I mean, even like here where I live, it's not far from the sea, so a lot of people have moved from the English towns, the northern towns, into here because obviously they would come here on their holidays because the air's clean and it's just a whole other way of life than being in an industrial city. So
Right.
what's happened is the English language has come along with it, and you can hear when people are talking, like when I was growing up, you know, like people will say, if you're talking to somebody you don't know their name or whatever, you'd call them love or you'd call them honey. I hear honey all the time, you know, that type of thing. But here it would be cariad or del. But now you don't hear that, only with people who are older, because now the younger ones are following on with hun or honey, and it's like that's not. So you just see how it's been, the language is being changed, if that makes sense. And of course it's a hard language to learn if you don't speak it, if you're not raised in that you know, environment. So it's I think, like when you look back through the history of the English language and the way it was changed and why it's been changed, and how, you know, we know that words are frequency. Like I share with people all the time, and it's, you know, the word witch means wise woman. you know, but
Right.
you say witch, brain goes into its filing cabinets. Oh, she's got a long pointed nose and she's got warts on and a pointed hat and da-di-da-di-da, and she wears black.
And she throws spells on people. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what if, you know, in the days, I mean, obviously the another thing that why they had all these, like, you know, going after these women and calling them witches, because after the what were they, the holy wars and everything, and a lot of men didn't come back, their wives then inherited their land. So of course they're witches, so the church then took their lands and their money, you know. So I
Right.
mean, you know, we don't, and in that time, that power, you know, people were afraid. And like now, look, there's so many things to make us become afraid, and words are being used, media's being used, images are being used to corral us in a way, you know, and we're like, no, we're going this way, bye, you know, I'm not going in that direction. So, you know, so the word, another word that I love to tell people, and I know in America it's used very differently to us, is the word bitch. So I know, like, a lot of my American friends will go, oh, you know, can't say that word. And like, if I'm going to talk about a female dog, that is the word I would use, because that's what she is. But the word bitch means she who protects. Now, again, you know, the feminine, the words that, you know, we know there's another word that begins with a C that nobody likes to say. It's a 4-letter word, you know. Again, that another distortion, because those were powerful words. Those were powerful feminine words, you know. And
Yeah,
again,
but
it's not.
we've been taught the negative connotations of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
of course, as soon as you say that word now, in a way, it brings a negative energy. And this is, again, going back to the Reiki and what, you know, the Reiki means, that sort of thing. The amount of people over the years I have told this information to, you know, about what Mikowa Sui was teaching, and then, you know, it's all about yourself and what Reiki means and da 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 da, all those things. And it's like, no, I can't hear what you're saying. No, I can't, you know, it's like, because there's such a low frequency, and we don't, again, you know, we don't want to expand out of our little safety area. We don't want to, you know, break out of there, because it's unknown, and we're told and we're taught, oh, you know, it could be dangerous out there. It could be, you know, it's frightening. You best just stay there, stay small. Don't remember who you really are. Do you know what I mean? So I think that now is becoming, there's such a I think there's such a restoration happening, which is that whole, the truth coming out, and whatever truth is, I mean, who knows what truth really is, you know, but there's a restoration because there's a remembrance, and there's an aligning now with who we really are, because from my perspective and other things that I listen to, is that when we come here to this place, and I don't see the earth as a ball spinning in space. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't a ball spinning in space. That's not where I think we are. I think we're in a smaller part of the earth that's actually has got a dome over it, and it's because I've seen that for myself rather than just because I've read that. What I heard was that there's an infection, and while the infection's there, there's a blister over the top, and the blister will be removed when the infection is gone. So we know we've got these what's called interdimensional beings that are actually infiltrating this reality and making us not have the human experience we were meant to have. So anyway, but from my perspective, remembering who we are is like, when we come here, the earth gives us a body, and that body then connects with the earth grid, which is why, like with the octahedron, you connect with the bottom part of the diamond connects with the earth and the earth grids, and then you have your diamond light grid, which is a receiver and a transmitter, and then the top part is what we would say connects us to like Mikowa Sui would have said, that the celestial bodies or the heavenly, or for me, I'd say my true self. So my essence, the reality of who I really am, is where that other part connects, and then the energy flows between the two. So the earth grid informs us of, you know, what the world's about, you know, that resonant field, you know, that's a tree, that's this, that's that, you know, and this is the experiences that we have while we're here. But the earth grid was hijacked and created a lower frequency. So this place where we're at, this realm or whatever anyone wants to call it, was then, the vibration was lowered, so that when we came here and the earth gave us a body, the body ages, because now the earth grid was, the frequency was distorted, and then we can't leave. So we are recycled back, or we have this reincarnation where we have to keep coming back to relive over and over and over again. And then we're now, I believe, we've changed the earth grid, we've raised the frequency of the earth grid, which means now that was here and infiltrating is now going to leave. But what will happen is, because it created all these systems to enslave us and to keep us trapped, and we know that, you know, I mean, you know, money and all these other things were systems that were created to enslave us, to keep us, you know, I'm not safe unless I have, type of a thing. So I then have to follow the rules so I can have that. And like you're saying, like an addict, we were like addicts, you know, or, you know, the image that just came to my mind was, it was our mother's breast milk. You know, if the mother leaves, we starve, you know, and that's that. But
Right.
now the reality is, the higher vibrational frequencies will actually restore the earth eventually. I'm not saying it's going to be an overnight thing, because we know it's not. It will restore it to what the earth should have been, to what this place should have been, to what nature should have been. And so all the structures that were created to enslave us will fall away. And that is our fear, because we want to stay plugged in, or, you know, and that's what I think we're now unplugging, which is that return into wholeness, because we don't need to connect anymore, because actually the earth grid is informing us, and we're now got a better flow of energy. The frequency has changed, which then you know, restores the truth, if you know what I mean. And it's like, now we have that stronger connection, like you were saying before, that connection to the earth is vital. But we were taught, and I remember being taught this, you know, quite a long time ago, that, you know, you should meditate, get out of your head, get out in the ethers. You know, your whole spirituality means being away from the earth, being out of the body, you know, or forget the body. What's the body? We're ascending out of the body. No. And again, that's another trap. That was another trap, that you have to keep working to ascend, to go up through these dimensions. I mean, again, what a program that has been. You know, how many times do you hear, oh, we're third dimensional, we're going fourth, fifth, blah, 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 blah. We're already here. This is us. You know, this is where we are. And we are all, you know, we are multidimensional. We are multidimensional, but we haven't been able to access that because of that earth grid being distorted. And now, as I said, this is why we came here with those lighthouses, to shine that light and change the frequency. And we can see it all around us now. You know, more and more people speaking light languages. Are we speaking light languages because the English language has been so distorted? To bypass the conscious mind, to bypass those labels and the brain going to its filing cabinet, you know, and pulling
Yeah, but
out
it's not just us speaking light language, people from other countries.
yeah,
right?
oh yeah.
So yeah, so it's not just us trying to break through the English language.
No.
But even other countries, like you said,
Yeah.
even other countries, we're saying our English language is distorted and it's meant to keep us in the box, while other countries probably might say the same thing, right?
And how many other countries now are they speaking English? You know, it's like the language that everyone speaks, isn't it? I mean,
oh, I
like,
see. I
you
see.
see what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
So from a perspective of frequency, and again, we forget this, you know, because we just see this human body. We forget we're a resonant field. You know, the physical body is an image that's given to us, but it's not who we really are, you know. So as we're resonating our frequency out, even just having conversations, you know, is that being who we, is that the truth of us that we share? You know, like we were saying before we came on, I mean, I don't know what I'm going to say until I start speaking, and I think most people will say the same. You know, like you said, how many times have you asked me to come on, and I'm like, what would I talk about? I haven't got anything to say. You know what I mean? Because to me, it just goes with a flow. It's like it just starts coming, and I follow the thread of where it takes me. But
Right.
I think like for all of us in a way, we can all do that, but we don't necessarily trust it, and we don't believe, you know, we're kept to be like, I mean, I know, I'm sure you're the same as me. When I was young, you know, I wouldn't really speak. You know, I was so shy and so nervous, and even just before Neil died as well, I wouldn't come forward. I'd be the person that was like, don't talk to me, you know, don't ask me anything, you know. And now it's like, no, this I'm forward, I'm here. The real me, the multidimensional me, is stepping forward. It's embodying this body, this physical body. It's stepping onto this world and saying, this is my world, this is our world, you need to leave. You know, you need to leave and let us be in peace, have our experiences, you know, be in joy. And I think that's another distortion, I think, very much of the spirituality box, in inverted commas, you know, and not to be derogatory at all. I think that's another distortion, is this whole, I mean, and how many people do you hear go, love and light, love and light, love and light, but they don't feel that in their hearts. They want to feel it, so they say the word. They want to feel, you know, that they like everybody. But you know, we should, as a human being, we're having experiences, we're having emotions, and we might feel really, really pissed off one day and really, really angry. You know, I was saying this to my mum the other day. We need to be allowed to have that and to express it. That's part of being human. But if we go and take that anger out on a person, that's doing harm, and that's not right. It's do no harm, you know, even to yourself, do no harm. But like, if I want to feel sad and cry, for years, I wouldn't allow anyone to see me cry, because it was like, oh, you're weak if you cry. But our strength is in our feeling and our emotions, and that sensitivity. That's actually our strength. But we've been taught, well, you're weak, you know, that you shouldn't be out in public if you're like that, you know. And that's the opposite. It's so inverted that now, like for me, every time somebody says, you know, or government says such and such a thing, I go, right, well, what's the opposite to that? Where's the, because it's inverted. I'm not saying,
yeah, we're
but,
beginning to notice more contrast. We're beginning to acknowledge or identify the contrast, you know, instead of the programs.
Yeah, because we've been taught that we're the small ones, we have no power, and those in authority over us have all the power, and it's actually the opposite, and they know it. And they don't want us to know who we are. They don't want us to remember who we are, because it's curtains for them. If that's the, you know, and which is now what's going to happen. You know.
Yeah, there's a billion of us and one of them, right?
Yeah.
Do you, so if you
go on.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was just going to agree with you what you said then.
Oh, okay. So if you were going to refer people to different bodies of work, you mentioned the coated armor.
Kotadama, yeah.
I always say that wrong.
Or Kotatama, yeah.
Okay.
It's in the book. I have written about it in the book. I have written a lot about it.
Yeah. So for everybody who hasn't read the book, there is a lot of information about Reiki in there.
Yeah.
And the true history of Reiki. So you mentioned Aikido. And so what other bodies of, like, what about the person, I won't say your friend, because I don't think you've ever met her in person, but Jacqueline.
Oh, yeah, Oracle Girl.
Would you refer people to?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's oraclegirl.org, I think it is. Oh my gosh, she is amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
you will have your buttons pushed, and you will actually really question so much,
Mhm.
you know. But I think when you're ready to get there, I'm like, when I connected, I remember some friends saying to me, Rachel, you need to go and listen to Jacqueline, because you're saying the things she's saying. And I'm going, okay, yeah, you know, all right, and I'll listen or whatever, you know. And when I listened, I was like, oh my goodness, I've been saying that for such a long time. And like now, she does in April and in October, she does what's called a silent immersion, and the whole month it's like a purification every single day. And I'll tell you what, we ride some waves on that, but it can be such a good thing. But in this last April's one, she introduced our dragon self, and that was like bang for me, because that I've been messaging her, and on like events that she'd done, I'm putting comments in the comment box, can you talk about dragons, what's going on with dragons, because I'm really feeling such a strong connection to that. And I've got other people connecting with me, and yet there's no resonance there, and I'm like, actually no, that's a distortion. So what, you know, because we know that we're going to have the brighter our light shines, the more we're going to have something coming in to take that light. And that's, we've got to be so vigilant with that. And I'm not talking about protection or anything like that, it's who we really are, you know. But she started talking about the dragon self coming forward, and if anyone looks in the book, one of my images was called Diamond Fire, and it was the first time I actually put a dragon on a painting, and I wrote that our dragon self aspect was coming forward. Now that was years before I'd even heard who Jacqueline was, you know. And but yeah, I highly recommend her. And also another wonderful friend of mine, Julie Umpleby of Diamond Light World. Julie, so if you've heard of Diamond Light codes, which most people have, Julie's the person that coined that phrase. She actually brought Diamond Light, started having these images coming through, but they were multi-dimensional. They were actually, she could see them actually moving and vibrating, and of course it was a huge surprise to her. And those came through in 2003, 2004, and she's been teaching and sharing. She's a trained scientist as well, so she comes at it from a logical perspective and highly intuitive perspective as well, and brings information in like you wouldn't believe. Amazing.
Yeah.
She's so down to earth. I mean, just I love her. I love her to bits. And like I say, I've been there, part of the community since 2009, and that feels so much like home to me. You know, the whole octahedron and the diamond, and I tend to say the sacred octahedron more than the diamond, but obviously people know it as diamond. And I talk a lot about that in the book as well, with my connection and why I call them diamond light codes, diamond light languages, rather than just light languages, you know. Again, it's a word, it's just a term, isn't it? It's something that people recognize. But what is it? It's sound and vibration, you know. It's who we really are. And we don't always, if you like, again, we see a physical body and we think that we're just this tiny thing. And how often are we told, oh, you're just a speck in the universe, you're this big, you're nobody. It's like, seriously, we are the universe. You know, we are the universe. We've just been taught with, go on.
Yeah. So speaking of that, we're running up on 2 hours, and
Oh my God, yeah.
there's no limit, but I am worried about the size of the recording,
Yeah.
if they'll limit me on the size. So would you be willing to share some light language with us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
We are receiving.
Okay. Clear my throat. Slurp a cold tea. I'm not a fan of cold tea, but there we go.
Oh, it's gone cold, huh? Yeah.
I know I did too much talking. Normally I'd have drunk my tea hot. Okay. Gonia ya wishena kama yana weta e shahala na goela iana ama goite e. Shinanea wea ka we mot o shehe kanata e ok ot e shinamatai. Tana ya tuiet e kuot e ma ni ya. Koea ni e ok o me at e shahala na I koeta e. O mi kianata shehewikana la it e shahawiana. Amanani ki ala wiheana it ishna kit ushna. Ma ut e na galea ta te diana. Ona mana kia wihenia moku. Kuni ish ak ut o la na ya. Anamatai elia ka wie kataeta e. Nani it e ukot e shaat a mawia na yani. Shokot e maat a wia ni ala a. Tanayani I akot e mahati e la niania. Shenaya. O ya mikiala te a she toela. Te et ot ek at e shaat a ni akot awila ka a mo ka ot et e. Sha'an at alik at awit ekat mo ukukot ekat nai it ut u shana yede e. Teneat ut ek at urshat nik mo ut u sheli ikat a. Tana ana ut e shahalaka ni at ut ut het is ut gene at et shamawi gut uit usha atanaya naya go ma ene hata ishe ena et lawi ana akata a ana at et shoot ek ut eshna at uk ak at ishnik ak amat at la at mahana yani tuyet shako ma anayan it Thank you.
Thank you so much. I muted my microphone just in case Jet started barking.
Okay. He's adding to it.
Yeah, we couldn't let you get away without sharing some light language with us.
No. Thank you.
I wish there was a way to transport you here because so many people have said, "Oh, I just want to meet her." And I'm like, well, book
Hello,
a ticket.
everyone.
Book a ticket and go to Wales. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe
it's magical here.
Yeah, it is.
In the North Wales, anyway. Well, all of Wales, but I live in the north.
Yeah, I was really glad that one year that I was able to spend, I think it was 3 days there, and that wasn't enough.
No.
I got
and I was thinking,
tour.
where can I take you? Where can I take you? So many places.
I got the spin tour when I was there, basically. But one day I'll be able to stay there longer,
Well, you got the copper mine. You got the copper mine. You got the ancient yew tree.
I did. Got a few castles here and there.
Castles. Yeah, we're surrounded by castles. Did I take you to the St. Winifred's Well? Did I take you there? No, that's
no. Oh yeah. When I first. Yeah. When I first came off the plane, that's the first place that we went.
Yeah, because we took all the pictures of the Welsh words, didn't we?
Yeah. And you took me to the forest, of course, and also to the hills. What was it called?
The hill.
I can't think. I can't think of the word.
Snowdonia, by Snowdonia, the
Snowdonia.
mountains.
Yeah, you took me to Snowdonia. Yeah.
Yeah, we drove
Yeah.
through there, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, we did a spin tour definitely in 3
Oh,
days.
gosh,
You
yeah.
packed a lot into 3 days.
Yeah.
But
there was a lot to show you, and it was like, I can't even, well, I took you to the longest place name as well, didn't I?
yeah,
Yeah.
you did.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
say that for do you mind saying it for
Oh,
everybody?
yeah, that's fine. So this is it's not that far from me, actually. It's probably, I don't know, 45 to 50 minutes away. It's the longest place name in the UK. And like I said before, it's actually the description or the directions to what was a village, which is now a town. And one of my oldest friend, he's actually from there. So, and he didn't speak Welsh till he was 10 years old. It's very Welsh by there. So the longest place name in Wales and in the UK is,
Wait for it.
wait for it, drum roll. Make sure I don't make a mess of it. Llanfair Pwllgwyngyg o Ger Swindropis Llantysilio Gogogoch.
That didn't sound long.
It is long though.
Yeah, no, when you look
Yeah.
at it written, it's
Yeah.
very long.
Yeah.
But probably in the world though, because I can't think of any other place
there
that
are
has
longer, there
that
are
many
longer
characters.
places. Yeah, there are longer place names. I think somewhere like New Zealand and places like that. I think there's Maori names, and probably, I think it's very similar that it's description.
Yeah,
it's like where I
probably.
live here. There's an English word, an English name, and there's also a Welsh name. But the Welsh name, the English name is not the translation. It's a completely different name. But where I live is called Llanelwy, and there's a river here called the River Elwy, or the Avon Elwy. And when you have a place name that's Llan at the beginning, it means there's a church by the river. But church is Eglwys, it's not Llan. But Llan Elwy means there's a church by the River Elwy. So again, it's a beautiful language, and of course we're called the land of the song because the language has to flow. So like something I always try to explain to people is with the Welsh language that the reason why it's so difficult is because it mutates. And the reason it mutates is so that it can flow. It can't have any, like for an example, the word dragon is draig, D-R-A-I-G, draig. And the word for red is coch, C-O-C-H. So you wouldn't say, like if you wanted to say the red dragon, you wouldn't say draig coch, because it doesn't sound right. Draig coch, even though those are the words. You'd say draig coch, like that. So it mutates. So the C becomes a G on coch, it becomes goch, and the D becomes a th, and it's draig goch. You can hear the difference, not draig koch, because it breaks up. So that's why it's a hard language to learn, because it mutates. And it's very phonetic as well, and we have different vowels as well. So yeah, so that's just, I mean, it is so beautiful when you hear people who are natural Welsh speakers. It's just the most beautiful thing to hear. And singing, because I mean everyone sings, and you know we have a lot of male voice choirs, and the children do lots of, I mean there's a national Eisteddfod, which is like a coming together of all different things. Is singing, poetry, you know, all the costumes, people come in their national costumes and things like that, you know, it's all over the world. And then every year there's what's called an Earth Eisteddfod, which is for the children, and they do recitals and poems and singing, and it's just amazing. My children loved it, absolutely loved it.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
it's very much into, you know, language, you know, so you can see, you know, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, that like in the 1900s they tried to stop the Welsh language being spoken in Wales, and what they did was children were only allowed to speak Welsh at home or in chapel. So when like church, you know, chapel or capel as they say here. So in school, you were only allowed to speak English. And so what they did was they created something called the Welsh Not, and it's pronounced, it's spelt with an N-O-T or K-N-O-T. I think I've shared with you before. And they would have a wooden plaque put round their neck, the child that spoke in Welsh, and it would say Welsh not. And what would happen is, if another child was speaking Welsh, because you didn't want to be wearing it at the end of the day because you got beaten. So if another child was speaking Welsh, the child with the Welsh not on would then tell the teacher that the other child was speaking Welsh. So that would go off them onto the other child. And whoever had it at the end of the day got beaten. So there was like, you know, there was almost
Pitting
like
us against each other. Yeah.
yeah, you know,
Yeah.
and so I mean, like where I live, there's a high school here, and my children were taught through the medium of Welsh, but because they're not natural Welsh speakers, they didn't find the mutations easy to do, so they would like literally translate when they were speaking in Welsh. They would think, well, what, because they think in English, and then they would translate that into Welsh. But if you're a natural Welsh speaker, it's just, you know, and to hear little children whose families only speak Welsh is amazing. It really, really is, you know, and
Yeah.
so beautiful, you know, it really, really is. And of course, we here in the north, there are, especially as you move into more into the country, where the villages are and that type of thing, there's a lot of natural Welsh speakers. And interestingly, the language in Cornwall, so what is Welsh? It's a very similar language. The Cornish language is almost identical to the Welsh language.
Oh.
And in Brittany, in France, because most of the UK at one point was considered Wales. We were sort of pushed back into this area, if you like. But most of the country, even up into Scotland, they spoke the language that is now called Welsh, because it was the oldest language in Europe. But in South Wales, they speak a slightly different language to North Wales. So it's just different dialects and different, you know, different people moving in, you know, because we're sort of, because we're Northern Wales, and like I said to you before, there isn't a direct road. There is a road route, but it's country roads to go down to South Wales from here. There's no, the railways were disconnected, so you now can't go direct by rail down to South Wales. You've got to go out into England, drive down through England, and then go back into Wales. But if you drove down through Wales, it's beautiful, but you've got hills and mountains and that type of thing, you know, so it isn't easy. You know, it's not as easy as you think. And you think, oh, it's such a small country, really it should be easy, but it would take me at least 5 hours to drive down through Wales to get to South Wales, you know. It's not an easy journey. It's a beautiful journey, highly recommend it, but it's not easy.
Oh yeah.
Not when you think like getting to England and you just go down the motorway and that's it. We just have one major road route. There's a motorway that goes down into South Wales from England, but because all the cities are down in south as well. I mean, where I live is classed as a city because we have a cathedral, but it's only a small town. So, and there are no other cities here. The cities are the ones that are in England that are across the border. That's sort of our closest cities.
Right. Yeah, Wales is so beautiful. It's so green and hilly and beautiful.
Full of rain.
I really loved it. Yeah.
Very fresh. It is very fresh here.
Oh yeah. Well, I probably need to stop the recording. Doesn't mean you and I have to stop, but
Okay.
I need to stop the recording. So is there any last sharings that you want, any last words to share with people? Although we can probably have a part 2, part 3, part 4 at some point.
Are you saying I talk a lot, Patricia? Yeah. I'm joking.
You have a lot to share, a lot of experience and, you know, knowledge to share. Yeah. So yeah,
I think that the thing I would share with most people is no censoring. Don't censor yourself.
Yeah.
And embrace who you are, love who you are, obviously, you know, and allow yourself to be human. Absolutely embrace being human and what that really means. And I think that you know, that's where the I think that's where the connection to the earth and being human actually brings us all together and will connect us all together eventually, you know. And let's see which way the world goes in the next few years, because I think there's a lot of changes coming.
Oh yeah, a lot of changes. Well, I look forward to being able to see you in October.
I hope we will. Yeah. I'm not going to promise.
By hook or crook, as they would say. That's
Yeah.
not a good saying, but anyway.
By hook or by crook, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a good saying, but anyway.
I suppose it is if you're a shepherd, isn't it? You know, by hook or by crook, you're coming with me.
Well, I look forward to seeing you at any rate.
Yeah.
And you and I talk all the time, so there's no distance.
No.
But thank you very much for sharing what you've shared with us. And I know everybody will really look forward to watching this and hearing this, because they've been asking for it. So thank you for coming on and for stepping out there and allowing the energy to move you to share what you shared.
I'll have to listen back now to know what I said.
Right. Yeah, we all do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I listen back and I go, I said that? Okay. Yeah. It was one of those, oh, I said that out loud.
That's what I'm saying. No more censoring, no more censorship, because then
no more
it's like, oh my gosh, I can't say that because it's going to offend that person or that person or that person. And it's hard, you know. We don't want people to be angry at us. We don't want people to not like us, you know. And that's part of keeping us small.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to stop the recording. I want to thank everybody for watching this episode with RachelSofia, and I encourage you to check back for other episodes. So wishing you all a wonderful day.